Hey guys, welcome back to week 6. We're going to be covering chapters 9 and 17 and really looking at project valuation and capital structure. So when we look at chapter 9, it really is dealing more with the valuing projects and firms. And chapter 17 really is trying to figure out if debt policies, do they matter? And so when we value our projects and firms, so enterprise valuation is the total value of a firm's business operations. It's independent of how it's financed. So when we're talking about the really what the firm is worth, this is used in firm valuation, mergers, project appraisals. But we're going to be looking at the market value of equity plus the debt minus the cash. And that is really how we come up with it from a high level standpoint. Um, when we're looking at free cash flow, this is really an important metric that you're always using in business. And so for free cash flow, this is the cash flow that's generated by the firm that's available for distribution to all investors, debt and equity holders. It's after operating expenses and investments. So the free cash flow would be earnings before interest and tax times 1 minus the tax rate plus depreciation minus capex minus the change in working capital. And that's really how you would calculate your free cash flow. Now, we want to know what that is because we really want to discount it in order to figure out what it's worth today. And so when we're looking at this, there's one approach where we can use the weighted average cost of capital method in order to discount it. And then the other, we could use the adjusted present value method. So one's the WACC and the other is the APV method. Um, with the APV method, this is really going to value the projects as all equity first. It's also going to add the value of financing effects like tax shields. So your APV will be your net present value unlevered plus the present value of financing benefits. For the weighted average cost of capital method, you're going to take your free cash flows and you're going to put that over 1 plus your weighted average WACC, um, and and that's really how you're looking to figure those out. When you look at the terminal value, this is the value of all future cash flows that are beyond the projection period. These are added to the final year of cash flows and they're sensitive to assumptions about growth. For example, here, if the year 5 free cash flow is $10 million dollars and the growth is 3%, and the weighted average WACC would be 8%, you would have in the numerator 10 million times 1.03, the growth rate, and you would divide that over the numerator of 0.08 for the WACC minus the 0.03 growth rate, and they give you $206 million. And so that would be a way to figure out the terminal value uh, of the company as well. Now, when we're looking at the equity value would be the enterprise value minus the debt. So once you've found your total firm value, you're going to subtract the debt in order to determine what the shareholders are actually entitled to. Sometimes you use multiple methods. You would have evaluation by comparables, and common approaches could be used for fast estimates. Uh, Ratios, maybe you take your equity value and you divide it by your earnings, EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. You could look at your price to earnings ratio, uh, or you could take your equity value and divide it by sales. So if comparable companies trade at the EV divided by your EBITDA at 8 times and your firm has an EBITDA of 20 million, so the estimated value equals 8 times 20 million will be 160 million. So these are some quick hits you can use when you're just trying to come up with, what is your company worth? Uh, Psalm 24, one thing reminds us that, valuation isn't just financial, but it reflects your stewardship and impact. Because it says earth is Lord's and everything in it. So uh, we know that everything that we have is God's, including the firm that we have. I heard a evangelist once say that, some people actually think that they own their own car. I was like, man, that's so, I paid for it, I worked for it. But who gave you the ability to be healthy, to have a job? Who gave you the ability to think in order to make that money? Everything you have is a gift from God. There's no exception. So um, we need to remember there's purpose in our life, not just profit. So always keep that in mind. Chapter 17, does debt policy matter? Uh, Capital structure. So really, capital structure is really going to be the mix of debt and equity a company uses in order to finance its operations. So capital structure affects risk, cost of capital, value of the firm, um, and those are all important things that you've got to figure out. Are we going to be more leverage or less leverage? You've got to figure those things out. The Modigliani-Miller M&M theorem is no taxes. Uh, so in a perfect market, the value of the firm is independent of capital structure. And the reason we look at it through this lens, through this model, is investors can replicate leverage themselves. So proposition two, another idea would be that leverage increases returns to equity, but it also increases risk. When you look at the M&M with taxes, once we add corporate taxes, debt creates value through the tax shield. So the tax shield would be your tax rate times your interest payments. And it really helps us see more of a modern use of debt that's valuable to firms. Uh, One of the problems you get into with the cost of too much debt would be, uh, eventually you bankrupt. So there's bankruptcy costs, legal fees, disruption, loss of trust. There's agency costs, conflict between debt holders and equity holders. Who gets paid first in liquidation. You can have debt overhang. New projects aren't pursued because benefits go to the creditors. Um, there's trade-off theories. So the definition, firms balance tax benefits of debt with the cost of financial distress. So optimal debt would be where marginal benefit equals marginal cost. That's really in economics and business. You're always looking for where your marginal benefit equals marginal cost. There's also a pecking order theory where firms prefer financing in this particular order, where you have internal funds first. When you can finance, there's debt second and equity third. And really, the reason with equity, you've given up ownership. So it'd be better to, that means it could affect your decisions within the firm. There's also signaling and market timing. So issuing equity may signal that managers believe the stock is overvalued, and firms may time the market. So issuing equity when the prices are high could be a signaling to the investors that are out there looking to buy. There's also a target capital structure. So in reality, firms operate with a flexible range of debt and equity rather than a strict target. Industry norms matter, and sometimes there are growth opportunities and profitability that can also affect the decisions as to when they decide uh, to issue debt or equity. So there's a lot of different factors that you'll see as we get into some of this week. Um, but one really good verse out there that I love. God spoke to me years ago about this. Dave Ramsey talks about this concept, but in Romans 13:8 says, "Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another." So you've got to be cautious with your financial obligations, because when you get too much debt, you are owned. They own your next time. Losing debt, losing the ability to be in debt, gives you financial independence. So you're buying back financial independence when you save versus when you borrow. When you borrow, you're giving up your financial independence. So keep that in mind. And anyways, hope you guys had a great week and reach out with any questions you have. Talk to you soon. Bye.